You're listening to Talk by Turner.
Talk by Turner dives deep into intellectual discovery while examining what's happening in our world right here, right now. With topics ranging from screenwriting and modern dating to climate politics and how horror stories impact culture, Talk is for everyone. Whether you're new to something or you want to hear more about a subject you've always loved. Join us each week to hear from published authors and industry experts as they share their knowledge and insight. And make sure to find us wherever you listen to podcasts and check out turnerpublishing.com to explore our catalog of books. Now, let's check out who's on this week's episode. Jodie, welcome to Talk.
It's great to be here.
Is there anything new you're working on that we should know about?
Indeed. I am very close to releasing my next book called Take That Shit Over There, a book on boundaries. So how to recognize and repel nonsense.
I love it. And tell our audience a little bit about this move on motherfucker or MMF mindset that, is really at the core of a lot of your messages.
Yeah. So it's this philosophy is based on cognitive behavioral psychology, which is identifying the negative or judgmental things we're saying to ourselves and talking back to it. But what I found was if you add in certain language, it gets you to laugh, just like as you were going over the title and smiling, everybody laughs a bit. I guess if you're okay with the language. But the point is to introduce a little bit of humor as an antidote to all that shame and pain, and to help us be able to sort of detach from what's going on in the moment so that we can clear our space to think more reasonably in terms of talking back to ourselves. And laughter heals.
So you have a lot of years, of experience as a counselor, both as a psychologist and an executive coach. Why this career? A lot of people love to say that they want to go into this, but why did you choose this path?
Well, I don't know that when I first went into psychology, I don't know that I understood why more than there had to be more than just medication. But what I think is, if I'm being honest, and a lot of people aren't going to be honest when you answer that question, it's a path to understanding yourself and other people. And then it gets sort of addicting because that's a never-ending path. And so while I have learned a lot about helping other people, I'm growing right along with them. And that's like just never-ending fun and sometimes scary.
A big question, dating apps. How have they altered the dating landscape? Let's just get into the gist of it.
And I can actually answer that because I've been in it long enough to have seen the before and the after. And I don't want to come off as not a fan, but yep. The reality is most people come to see me complaining about how horrible it is to be on the dating app and just the constant disappointment and feeling of it's hard to find somebody in an authentic way or to connect with them in an authentic way. So very slim are the people who come to see me saying they're a success. Mostly sometimes they're coming to counseling just to process the whole tragic experience of being on the app.
And how these apps, how have you seen these apps sort of impact or affect, people's willingness to commit to a long-term relationships? Is it positive? Is it negative? What's your output or what's your outlook on this?
So generationally, I think that's changing in terms of the millennials, in my experience, being more comfortable being alone. But, and so I'm not saying it might be generational, but it might also be because of the apps. People are just saying, no, thank you. Because it just sucks the life out of you to meet all these people and to be disappointed. And I think the big piece of that is what you see online doesn't match the real experience. And so people just feel kind of like, I don't want that. And so they take breaks, or sometimes they just give up because it feels kind of hopeless. So again, I don't mean to create this horrific picture, but I guess I'm just being honest about what I hear a lot about. So I think the apps have maybe contributed to people being a little bit more okay being alone, because the opposite is not that enjoyable.
So people are okay with being alone. Would you say that people also, because of these apps, they're never really satisfied with, what's in front of them? They're always looking for something, better. They might be even looking for multiple partners at the same time. What are some other behavioral shifts you've seen as a result of this?
Well, the issue underlying all of that is so many people spend time on social media, which is curated, and it creates this sometimes a flawed expectation about what relationships are like. Because fact of the matter is, all relationships are going to have some ups and downs. And I think what you're hinting at is true. It's a problem when people have this fairy tale like Disney image of what the relationship is going to be like. So, and that gets at, I think the core problem is people are posting pictures of themselves online that don't really reflect them, but that's what they think the other person wants. And then it's just like, why? It feels like such a waste of time. So it's how not only the people going in, but the people presenting themselves aren't being authentic or accurate.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends that tell me, they're always like, I'm never going to really find someone else. If they do find someone, they break up with them and they say this phrase, I'm not a lovable person. I'm never going to be loved. How do you get people out of that way of thinking?
Well, I mean, you got to dig in. Like, what do you think is behind that? And so it's not like I can't give you a straightforward answer for everyone, because some people, that goes back to their childhood. Maybe they never felt good enough, or they never felt loved. But then sometimes it's just a frustrating comment. And so it is digging into that thought. Where does it come from? Is it more pervasive, or is it a frustration? And what's the evidence to support it? But in the end, I think it was last year, I saw a video from Chelsea Handler, and it just cracked me up, where she married herself. I think she was looking in the mirror and she married herself. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, in that you have to be faithful to yourself. And if you see yourself as unlovable, I mean, that's truly how you see yourself. It's going to be really hard to allow anybody else to love you or to feel loved. And so that when you're asking that question, it provides a really great foundation to work on. How about loving yourself and having a good relationship with yourself before you can even think about moving with somebody else?
Yeah. Agree or disagree? Should you stay friends with an ex?
So, unpopular opinion is most of the time I say you can't. That there are exceptions, right? But I think there's a lot of baggage. But more so, I ask this question. So let's say that you've broken up and everybody's good being friends. My question is, how do you think the person who you're going to date in the future, assuming you're going to date somebody else, is going to feel about that? And how are you going to handle it? Because I'm going to tell you that if somebody came into my office and said, I met this great person, but they're best friends with their ex, I would say, red flag. It creates some anxiety or uncertainty into the relationship that doesn't need to be there. No, there are always exceptions.
And what do you tell people, the feelings they should have when they're, ready to move on? When would someone know when they're ready to?
You mean they're in a relationship and Well, I think, as I mentioned before, it's not all going to be champagne and roses, so to speak. So you can't say, okay, when you're not happy, but when you're pervasively not happy. And when the bads outweigh the goods, and you've tried to work on it, and there's no path forward. As I also think, we're in this culture, I think, of disposing of things pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so I also don't think because things aren't going your way that you just dump it. If you're really invested in a relationship, you need to explore, is there a potential solution? But when you've tried those things and you're just not happy, or you feel like you're losing a sense of yourself, that is probably a pretty good sign.
Yeah. My late father was 35 in 1965 when he got married. And I was 33 when I got married. And the reason I'm bringing up these ages is because Americans are getting married at an increasingly older age in this day and age compared to previous decades. Why this trend? Why is this going on?
Well, and if you go way back, they used to marry young women off quite early.
Yep.
And there was like a financial incentive to the family. And I think that there were cultural things going on, very unhealthy. So I think hopefully we've grown. But
Yep.
I think that I think that answer is very complex, because I think there's a whole stage of adulthood now called emerging adulthood, or between adolescence, and people don't feel like I'm a Gen Xer. At 18, the idea of staying in my family's home was abhorrent. I would poke my eyes out thinking about it. So no, that wasn't even an option. But these days it is, and it's okay. And so, and it's a tough economic time to support oneself and a family. So I actually see it as a good thing. It's better to get into a marriage, I believe, when you know yourself better. And if you're not even done growing as a human, it's really hard to know who's a good fit for you.
Do you think also on the flip side, because people are living longer, that may also play into it as well? I'm just curious.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. We're not as in a hurry. Hopefully we're not as in a hurry.
Yeah. How can people be sure they're with the right person, quote, end quote?
Interestingly, I would say that you date long enough. Like, I typically tell people, date for at least 18 months before you get married. You can get engaged, but it really takes a good solid year for people to let down and be truly who they are and show the ugly side too. And then the next 6 months after that year is figuring out, okay, does this fit for me? So give it time. But you'll know if it's the right person if you don't have to work. I want to be clear. You do have to work hard at relationships forever. But in terms of you're not always fighting. If you're always fighting when you're dating, it's probably not going to be any different when you get married. It's the right person if you feel like you can be yourself. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Do you believe we're in a loneliness epidemic?
For sure. Undoubtedly.
And what are the effects of that? I mean, the Surgeon General has said that, this is an issue now. So I'm just curious what you think maybe some ways of, what's causing this, basically.
I don't have all the answers to that. I really think it spiked over the lockdown period of COVID.
Yep.
And people have stayed in the habit of not seeing people face to face. And I'm sorry, the human brain is wired to be in the actual presence of another human being. And so people keep asking me, well, I say, how often do you see your friends? Well, I don't, but I text them and we call each other. But they're still not spending time doing things socially. And social media causes a lot of isolation, the sense of I don't belong. And in the end, we're seeing a rise in people ending their lives. And partially that's related to substance use, for sure. But I think that there's a sense of, I'm different. I don't have anybody. Nobody would understand me. And so that's the end outcome. of this loneliness epidemic, but I think that it's been coming on and it's continued. And we live in a very toxic culture. Where there's no psychological safety unless you know the people you're talking to very well, and so people are afraid, and I think people are going to continue to be afraid for good reason.
Let's talk about this burgeoning trend of AI, and specifically AI chatbots. A lot of people are turning more and more to them for relationship advice, possibly for therapy help. I'm curious for your, feedback on what you think of this trend as a psychologist. What's both good as well as what's dangerous or harmful about this possible trend?
Excuse me. So the issue is we don't have enough mental health providers. And in addition, people don't necessarily have the insurance or money to access healthcare. So in that aspect, I could say, okay, well, I can see the positive. Mostly I don't see the positive because I think, again, it has the potential to contribute to this feeling of loneliness, of not being completely understood, or here I am talking to somebody who's not real, or I say somebody, a voice or whatever that's not real. I'm humanistically trained. And so that means at the core of everything I do is being able to connect to people very authentically and creating a space where people feel accepted, no matter what. They can say whatever they need to say, and I might not agree, but I accept them. And I believe that condition creates the ability to change, and the ability to reflect, and the ability to share shameful things or things that people feel really horrible about and they haven't been able to get past. And to do that with another human being, I think, is the healing piece. So I am biased. I'm not a huge fan, but I do see maybe some place for it, but not as a primary therapy mode.
When you look at therapy trends, let's say over the last 30 years, let's just go back to the 1990s. You had mentioned you're Gen X, I'm Gen X as well. What do those trends look like to you? Are they negative? Are they positive? Are there more people accepting of therapy? Are there more people disillusioned with it? Just curious for your take on, where therapy is sort of trending and if it's positive or negative.
So I really feel like Gen Z in particular, millennials for sure, and Gen Z are very embracing of therapy and psychological health. So I see all that as good. I think that the way we do therapy is also evolving in a very good way, meaning years and years ago, therapy was just open-ended. You came in every week and you talked about what was bothering you, and there was no change. There was no skill building. And what we're doing now is evidence-based. Like, I can do short-term therapy, you can feel accepted and you feel helped and heard, but you're doing work. Like, you're working on some of the skills that are going to help you at that time and beyond. And it's time limited, so it's better use of the resources.
What's some of the biggest problems that drive people to couples counseling? I mean, when they come in, what's the main sort of issues that drive them to want to seek therapy or counseling? So,
I think my top two issues are in people who have blended families. So when there are stepchildren, that's a challenge. Even if you love your stepchildren, there can be philosophical differences, and then ex-spouses and things like that can stir things up. So I see that quite a bit. But the other thing is people who marry or maybe they're not married, maybe they're just monogamous or cohabitating or whatever, but they're with somebody who's their opposite. You've heard opposites attract. Well, opposites might attract, but over the long term, big problems typically arise. And that's what I see most commonly. And I probably drive people a little bit bananas because they'll come in saying, one person is saying, well, this is a problem, that's a problem. And I'll ask, well, has it always been that way? Well, yeah, but now it's a problem, right? So they want somehow the other person to have magically changed. Maybe they saw the best in them and that's what they went with, and it wasn't a match with reality. That's very common as well.
We're speaking to Dr. Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt. She is author of the book, Getting to Good Riddance. Doctor, what's one thing you hope people, can take away from the episode today?
Well, I think my bias is your relationship with other people is built on your relationship with yourself. So get yourself right, work through those issues, and then maybe think about somebody else. But you can work on yourself by being in a relationship, by seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes. But the primary work is within you to do. And we're all works in progress, and hopefully that goes forever.
Love it. Where could listeners find you online if they wanted to connect?
Believe it or not, JodieEckleberry-Hunt.com, but I am also with Turner Publishing. I have several of my books with them, and LinkedIn, Facebook. I am on Threads. I am on Blue Sky.
All right. You're sort of everywhere.
I'm everywhere. Yeah.
Dr. Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt, thanks for joining on Talk by Turner.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Talk by Turner. Make sure to check out more at turnerpublishing.com. Talk highlights authors from Turner Publishing's catalog of thousands of books to drive important conversations that are relevant to our current culture. Talk is about more than just books. It's about giving new audiences a seat at the table alongside expert writers as we navigate an increasingly changeable and uncertain world. By exploring a wide range of topics in the context of everyday life and politics, Talk is your go-to podcast for discovery and discussion.